All right. So today what we will do is we'll continue and we'll take a very interesting topic, which is more with respect to, the web proxies aspects. So web application attacks, we will, in different types of web application attacks, we'll see that, we'll see what are the different types of compromises that is your physical or infrastructure related, compromises that is happening with respect to the taking advantage of web. And, with respect to how you're connecting, in case you're connecting your cable on network or, social engineering any of your employees or, the server rooms and trying to connect to your devices. So we'll use some of these different aspects and try to understand that how, the web application attacks actually happens, right? So what we'll do is we'll go through these different aspects, as part of our today's module. So we will understand what is the Open Web Application Security Projects, the webs, what are web proxies, what are the different aspects of, how do you do command injection, how do you do account harvesting, how do you do SQL injection, cross-site scripting aspects, how we'll do that. Then we'll also look into some aspects of what are the CSRF or the cross-site request forgery aspects, right? And we'll see a couple of solutions and tools in them. Not only limiting to these, we will see keep on seeing as we'll keep on looking going forward to each of these topics. What are these some of these different topic, ways how the attackers primarily tries to exploit your entire vulnerability in these different web application layer. So, and what are the ways how we can try to solve or to try to mitigate these aspects? Okay. Now, what we'll do is we'll start with the first very interesting topic, which is to understand. Now, as we have seen, the attackers are trying to, compromise the physical security of these different applications, right? So for that, you will see that they might be trying to get different aspects or different components. They will try to take in different ways or start looking in for different ways how they can start getting into these different. So it's one by one, we'll start looking into one each of them and we'll try to understand what is, these. Now, to start with, we'll start with the topic which is on web proxies. Now, okay. Now we'll start understanding what are web proxies, how they have been used in, in your designing the different systems, what are different ways the attackers try to utilize or, try to understand the vulnerabilities which are there in these, and what are the different ways how you could be able to mitigate these different aspects, right? So these are some of the things that we will try to see, and we will try to spend some time in understanding what are the best ways how you can start solving some of these. Now, just to understand or just to start with, what is a web proxy? So, in very simple terms, normally, whenever you're designing any kind of a system, right? So, these web proxies that you have, or for example, you have these, the web servers that you said, right? Or these are primarily ways how you can understand, the as part of your user application, user layer and your application layer that you have. So these are primarily the layers where, it will be useful for communicating, right? Now, all your contents that you have, like for example, you have your web pages, you have your images, or the any data or text that you have, all the other type of textual kind of data, you will see that are being delivered through these web servers. So there, will be all the end user would be using through your web server, like your browsers and all. These are all your examples, right, that you will be having where you can consider like uh, the end communication is happening to these 10 clients and all this kind of. So for that, you will see that there could be a kind of a proxy, which is more like a mediator you can consider, which will be used for, your communication, the client that you have and, the server that you have, right? So across your client and the server, the proxies and the, will be acting like a mediator, right? And they will be also performing a lot of these different, additional capabilities. Like, for example, they can provide caching, they can provide load distribution. So all of these are some additional aspects that they will take into consideration when they are trying to uh, connect them, right? So when you are defining or when you are, designing, so if you see from an architecture perspective, how the architectures would be looking like, right? So for example, you have a web browser and you have a web server. So in between, you will see that there would be like a proxy that would be able to connect your server to your web browser to your web server, right? So that's a very simple way of how you can look into. And each of these web server would be connected to, there could be a unique address that would be useful for showing it. So you have something called as the IP address. So you'll see this, that would be useful. Now, some of these popular web servers, like for example, you have the Apache HTTP, you have that, you have IIS from Microsoft IIS, and all these are some of the popular ones, the web servers that which we might have heard of. But these are also being categorized. These web servers could also be of different types. These web servers, primarily might be based on the type of the use case that they have, based on the type of the, uh, you know, these, what is the use case that you have. So these web servers are primarily, would be helping you in this entire aspect, right? So when you want to connect to the internet, right? So a proxy server or, a web proxy would be useful for connecting to it. To understand this, so there are different ways in which these web servers are getting connected. So first kind of mode that these web servers they work is more in a shared host kind of a fashion, wherein you will see that in a shared host kind of a fashion, there could be, the servers which would be connecting to all the different types of host. These would be used for hosting over, you know, large number of websites, right? So this is like public websites, and a lot of these websites, open websites that you have would be useful. This is where primarily where resources are being shared. You also have something like a dedicated host where you'll see that only, let's say, a single website is being used for. So there is only web server for only one website, which is only having a dedicated host. Or let's say sometimes you have a combination of this, right? So based on the require, so you'll see certain times, you might also have to prepare sometimes use custom host, wherein, you will be designing a kind of you might be having a kind of a dedicate host first, and then within that you excuse me. So within that you might be also having a large number of internal websites that could be hosted within. Right. So this is more like a way how this works. Now, when you have these, these different layers across, right? So these will be useful. So for designing or using your, right? So how these actually work in, right? So for example, this web server, what is the way that, these web server works? So let's say, for example, you have a web client. This web client is primarily there, let's say, on the cloud. You can have it on the cloud. Okay. And then there is a web server. This web server is connected to a, let's say, a database. And then you also have, let's say, something like an app server. So this app server is connected with your different apps databases. There's an app server will have an app database. You have the web server as a static database. Now, if you see, these would be connected, right? So let's say this app server has a connection with your app DB. You have this web client, which is there, right? Now, what happens is how does entire community, just excuse me for a minute. I'll just do that. Let me just
Yeah.
Actually, I was just having sneezing, so just give me. Yeah. Yeah, sorry. Because of the dust, actually, I was just getting. Let me just. So now this entire connection that you have, right? So you'll see that, let's say, this web client that you have or the browser will be trying to communicate, or sending a request to your web server. Now, this communication that you will be seeing would be more like your, a specific HTTP request that it will be sending it. And this web server, what happens is the web server would be, looking into this. So if, let's say, for example, this web server will be checking within the respective static database, the web server database. Let's say if the requested data is already there in there, then the server will send an immediate response that, like, I have this data. So it would be an HTTP response that it would be sending. Now, supposedly if it doesn't have the data, right, then what happened is web server will be forwarding this request to a app server. Now, this will be through a something called as a servlet kind of a request that it will be sending. Okay. So what happens is now the application server will try to look into this data store. It will try to find out the required information also. And if it tries to get it, then it will try to send a response back, right? So based on that request, if it finds this in the here, then there will be a servlet response that it will be trying to give it. In case if this application server who is looking into the data store is able to find it, then it will send a right. So primarily, it will be responding back to the client. In case if it is not able to find it, then it will give the necessary status of what it is, right? So the application server, if you see, it will be designed to run all these applications primarily. That's might be requiring some different computations or different aspects, different complex computations. So you'll see that there are two different things which might be there. So one, it provides this app server provides a very high computational power, right? So if you use it for your high computational computations, applications and all. So those kind of aspects is something which is very easily done by using my the application server. And is this application server is only required in case if there is an intense computation that has been required, where which this web server is not able to handle, right? So that is something your application server is able. So there is very high require of this computation pace. So you'll see this web servers plays a very important role, right? Now, just like app server, these web servers that you also have, these web servers have different responsibilities. So one thing that you'll see, it is able to handle your client request. So like for example, whatever you're accepting or handling this entire incoming HTTP request and the response, that is something that you can see that is been done by your web server. Then you can see that it will be also useful for serving any of your static and dynamic contents. Like for example, there are different types of request and response that you might have based on the different types of contents. Like for example, you have the HTML, request. You have the other images that is coming in or required from to be shared by the system's perspective. So all this kind of, you know, the static and dynamic contents that you have that could be very easily shared by the web server, right? Then the other aspect that it does is something called as load balancing. So in a load balancing perspective, you'll see that, you know, these web servers would be able to distribute the incoming traffic across your entire backend servers, right? And this load balancing will also ensure that no one single server becomes like a bottleneck, So there should be continue the work should continue and there should be not like any kind of a showstopper that could happen. So these are different other things that you'll see that which is being done by the web server. The fourth component you can say is more with respect to caching and content delivery, right? So that is also very much important. So because what happens is these sometimes these web servers would be caching very frequently the requested content. That will basically try to reduce your response time and server load, right? So that is also one of the important aspect with respect to content delivery and caching aspects. You can see that. And so these are some of the things that you can see, where these web servers are there. So some of these very popular web servers, in case you might have used any web application, is like your Tomcat services and all. So Tomcat services you might be using like sometimes these applications in the backend is require these Tomcat servers and Tomcat services. So that's a very good example of these web servers where you will see that they would be actually working in these overall aspects that you have, right? Now, in this entire architecture, a very important component that plays a very, a component that plays a very important role is your proxies. So whenever you will see that, between you and your, target, sometimes you might have to have a kind of a proxy, bringing a proxy in between, because sometimes the request might not be possible to be executed. Or sometimes what happens is you will see that things would not be are not getting planned as you might have thought of. So those kind of times you will see that uh, these uh, uh, um, these aspects of proxy server will start playing a very important role, right? So this proxy server, what is this proxy server, and where it? So now we already have seen how your entire architecture looks like. So let's say, for example, you have the entire, we have the client, we have my entire application that you have. So here, now they are being connected over my internet. Now, in between them, we introduce something like a proxy, right? So this is like a layer that you'll see. We have these boxes. Now, the entire role, what is this proxy is trying to do is, um, it basically all these web requests and these responses that is coming in, so what happens is it will facilitate in routing all of this, right? So it will be routing as well as securing this traffic. So it plays a very important role in doing this, right? So what happens is as you can see that the client is submitting a request to access to some content in that in our previous example we have seen where you will be going to my uh, you know, my web server, right? So you see that in between what we have is the web server is then getting connected to my application server. Just give me a minute. Okay, so sorry for that. So what happens is as the request will be coming in with respect to accessing the content, you'll see that this would be forwarded to my the web server. And in between this, as the request is coming from the client to the web server, you will see that there would be a kind of a rather than directly being sending to the web server. Now what I have in between is I have this proxy, right? So in between now what I'm introducing is I'm introducing this proxy. So rather than directly the web client trying to access contents, so what we have is we have the proxy in between, right? This layer would be trying to do the entire heavy loading of the request. So because of this distinct IP address that the proxy will be having, it would be transmitting this request to the entire the server. It will be concealing the original user IP address and all. So the web server will actually not get the original IP address of the website. And based on that, because of that, what the web server will be just taking it as a normal request, right? It will be, it is doesn't require the original IP address and have that. So all that communication, the middle communication is something that you will see that it will be performed by my entire proxy server. So proxy servers is something you will be seeing that will play a very important role. It can scan the required data, it can check for potential threats, in case if there is there before it is being forwarded to your the requesting device. All of those things is something I can build my all the security components within my proxy layer, right? So this proxy would also have, the capability. Some of the other things that you can see within the proxy is like there would be a local cache, cache, because of which you can see that these proxies would be able to store the frequently accessed websites and all. At the same time, they would be also able to provide, these kind of requests to all kind of users. Rather than directly having directly access to the client and the internet, they would be able to. So there is a faster request and the retrieval process that can happen. Multiple request and retrieval could be, processed or queued in. We have the queuing as a one of the important aspect, right? So that is also something that you will see that has been taken care by these proxy servers. Now, we normally this is primarily the whole reason why we have these proxies. Like for example, working on the performance or the controls or privacy aspects and all. But sometimes what happens is these proxies could also be used for some of the other aspects. Like for example, people then start misusing this. Like for example, they will start, injecting the privacy aspects, and in case if this could be compromised, then I can start manipulating the IP address. I can start looking. There could be a malicious, usage where I can also start misusing these aspects, right? So that is your entire reason why we need to have a good proxy server, because the benefits are definitely there. But if you can have a proxy server, then there could be some kind of a misuses also that can be happening, right? So these are some of the good things that we have seen about proxy servers. Some of the disadvantages which you can look about with this proxy servers is because there could be something from a in the security aspect, the performance aspect, that it could be, I might have to start thinking, right? So a disadvantage, critical disadvantage is the security aspect, right? Because normally these proxies, they do not have a very great encryption capabilities in default state. I mean, we'll come on that, what are the ways how it could be done. So encryption capabilities and all is not very great, because of which the data will start getting vulnerable to interception, or people can the actors in between can start exploiting, right? So compromises and all with respect to business sensitive data, like for example, your login details, login credentials, or proprietary information, you'll see that it is compromises can start happening. The other thing that could be there is primarily your data logging. So data logging is where, you'll see that, these proxies will be trying to capture and store these IP addresses along with all these web request data. Some of them might not be encrypted format, right? So depending on the whatever the server management capabilities is there, you can see that since it is not encrypted, this could be misused, or this could be breached, you know, and then some of them could be also got and sold out to other external parties. So because of which you'll see that data logging might, the privacy of the data breaches and all start getting data privacy aspects, data breaches aspects starts getting very high because the data breaches might start happening, right? Then one of the other these proxy servers, could be creating a lot of these aspects. Disadvantages are there. Then you also have some of these, which is more with respect to, since these a lot of these will be using open ports. So because of these, there would be a very increasing potentially attack vectors that the malicious actors can be exploiting. Where could be a lot of these security vulnerabilities that could be there, that could be exploited, right? So normally these proxy servers, since they're operating on these open ports, there would be a very high increase in potential, attackers trying to exploit these security vulnerabilities. And these open ports is something that you'll do. So normally, privacy is also one of the key concerns. So there is a limited privacy aspect. One thing that you can do is you can anonymize these IP addresses, right, as a kind of a protective measure. But there are only very few things that you can do. Like for example, for your web request and all, you can try to anonymize the IP addresses, but many of these free proxies primarily will be also working on unsecured networks. So that is also something that is a big concern. You might not be, very in a situation where you want to take care of all of these aspects as well. So unsecured networks could be one of the them, and that based on there would be a lot of these times you'll see use these websites. There would be some things which are the ads that you might be getting, right? Now, because of which these are also because they might be using these ads as a point of revenues, right? So they have these revenues streams and all. So you'll see that you would be getting redirected to other websites. There could be viruses or malwares, that could be uh, uh, also part of it. So that is, you'll see that that could be another key concern. Your privacy is getting compromised. Whatever you're doing would be being tracked in by these websites and all. What are the kind of things? And then based on that, some recommendations of the ads and all will keep on coming in. That is another thing. Now, there is also a kind of a performance inconsistency that you can see with respect to these proxies, because what happens is sometimes these free proxies that you have, you'll see that from a bandwidth perspective, there might not be sufficient bandwidth, right? That it would be able to request a lot of these, requests, simultaneous users and all. So this could be impacting the overall way in which the speed and those things could be there. You will be able to see that could be also the speed and the bandwidth issues will start coming up as well. Then you also have some other things which is more with respect to, um, so there could be some kind of limited functionalities that you will be having, on different app to app basis. You will be having different types of functionalities for app to app basis, wherein you'll see that the configurations that you will be having, the individual proxy settings for each application might be something different, right? So from app to app basis, the configurations might be sometimes changing. So you will see that that is also one of the key aspects that could be there, with respect to, which is a more of a like a disadvantage of these proxies. But having said that, some of these, in case if it has been utilized very well, then you will see that there are different ways how we can also start in getting some of these benefits of these proxy servers, right? So like for example, um, one thing that you can see as part of the benefits is your anonymity, right? So, for example, a lot of times you want to do something called as you want to browse the internet anonymously, right? So, anonymity is something that you want. You don't want the actual IP addresses to be identified, right? So, this anonymity is achieved. You can hide the user IP address and all. So you can have more like a private browsing kind of an experience, right? So that is one of the based on the use case that I was mentioning, right? So you want this is something or some of the times you want this. You don't want some unwanted ads and all. You want to safeguard. Sometimes you also have times where you your IP addresses might not be allowed, but when you start using a proxy, then you start getting access. So those are all the components that you can think of, other scenario that you can think of, right? Now, what you can see is since there is intermediary, it acts as an intermediary, right? So what happens is you can also have some of these, built in the secured connections and all. You can start having building some of your secure connections very, like for example, you have the SMTP kind of where for respect when you're doing your email configuration. So you have this SMTP request and all with a specific thing. So specific connection. So that is something that you can define, and then you can define your reverse proxies as well, right? So that can block some of your suspicious and repeated requests. So that is where you will see that a lot of these uh, threats which might be there. Like for if we have seen the denial of service attacks and all, we can start, start avoiding them. We can also even avoid my man in the middle kind of the attacks as well very easily through this. Then we also have, like as I was mentioning, location based is a very good important use case where sometimes what happens is there's sometimes some of the locations doesn't allow you to access some content, because those content might have been blocked in those specific region for that specific IP addresses and all. So when you use a proxy server and all, you'll see that, we try to trick these websites or trick the entire system from thinking that we are using from a specific location. Your virtual private networks and all, it helps you in doing these kind of aspects. So proxies helps in getting us these connections very easily. You can sometimes you use these proxies for content filtering also. Like in organizations, this is being largely used where I want to filter out some content. I want to put out some kind of a restrictions of what needs to be accessed, what doesn't needs to be accessed, and all. So those are something that you'll see that also is one of the benefit. I can start doing that. Like, we want to do enable censorships and content restrictions and all very easily. This is something that you can build in very easily. Now, what are the different types of proxy servers that you have, right? So there are there are a couple of main proxy service proxies that we will have. So we will see them and how are they different from each other? How are their architectures different from each other? Okay. So each of these proxy servers that we will see has a specific scenario, has a specific use case, or what is in which of the scenarios you will be using what. We will spend some time to understand each of them, and we will also try to differentiate between them. So just I'm stopping to share, and I'll start sharing again. Just give me a minute.
Okay.
Okay, so what are these different types of proxies that we have? What are these different types of proxy servers that we have that will help us in the entire communication between my web client, web servers, and my application server? So the first type that we're gonna see is more like your forward proxies. So forward proxies are more where you will be seeing that, the client that is, sending this request to these web servers. So normally you will see that this client is directly sending this request in a forward to the web servers. Normally in a forward direction, so these are being useful. These client sides are, in a forward direction, they are able to send this request. They would be able to, reach out to these users and, would be useful. So normally, this server will be acting like an intermediary between the client as well as the web server. And, you'll see this as forward proxy because the request is passing through the, forward proxy where before it is reaching out to the entire website. So you'll see that on the client's behalf, this proxy will be trying to submit this request to the website. It will try to receive the response, and then finally it will send the response back to you. So forward track proxies are very handy when we don't want the main server to able to see what is the client's IP address. It only has this proxy server IP address details, so a large number of scenarios is being seen where you'll have this proxy server handling majority of the traffic, and supposedly we want to block a specific website and all. So in those kind of scenarios also, you'll see that forward proxies are being used very commonly. The second type of proxy that we will have is more like a reverse proxy. So what happens in a reverse proxy kind of a scenario? So in a reverse proxy, you will see that that's just like an opposite to my forward proxy. Here, this server will be sitting between my web browser and my another server, and it will be handling this request on behalf of that, the server that is there, the target server. Now, instead of the client, which is there directly connecting directly to my main server, what will have this reverse proxy will try to intercept this request and will try to forward them to the server. Now, in this kind of a scenario, why we use this reverse proxy primarily to operate on behalf of my servers, right? So we will try to manage this request from the clients to the server. In the previous scenario, forward proxy that we saw, what we were doing is we were trying to see that the client request is being managed on behalf of the client. This sending the client request and all is something that is managed by the forward proxies. Whereas when you have these back reverse proxies, you will see this, it will try to manage this request from the to the server, whatever the request is coming to the server. So some use cases where you will see that reverse proxies are being used is in one case is with respect to load balancing. So load balancing, when you'll see, it will be trying to distribute the entire client request, across my entire servers, and will try to ensure that none of the server is overloaded, you know. So that is one of the things, that is one of the key important aspects when we are trying to use this reverse proxy. Then you'll also try to use this in scenarios where you want to reduce your denial of service attacks, because only the proxy server is accessible, to the outside, and which the servers will not be able to do. Or in scenarios where you want to cache the server response, right? So in those kind of scenarios, the caching aspects which you want to establish, you want to establish it very clearly. So in those kind of scenarios, you'll use a reverse proxy kind of a aspect, right? So so basically, if you see in both this, we have this forward proxies and your reverse proxies. So what is the actual use between them, or when to use them for which all scenarios? And to just summarize, what you can do is we can take this small table as a point of discussion and we can see this, right? So for example, as we have seen in forward proxy, it will be acting on behalf of my client, whereas in a reverse proxy, it would be acting on behalf of my server, right? So it would be in forward proxy, all those requests would be coming in from my client request to the server, whereas in a reverse proxy, the client request will be coming in on behalf of my server, would be handled on behalf of my server. Now, based on the client interaction, you'll see that sometimes, what happens in forward proxy is that the client would be aware of the forward proxy and it will explicitly configure it to communicate with the server. So that is a forward proxy where, the client is aware of these forward proxy. Whereas in a reverse proxy, the client is usually unaware, of this reverse proxy, interacting with it. And you will try to see that or understand that it is just try to think it as like it is like an it will try to interact as if it is like a with an actual server it is trying to interact. So, for forward proxy, most of the times you'll see your request coming in with respect to anonymizing the client request, controlling the internet access, and caching data locally. These are some of the use cases. Whereas for reverse proxy, it would be useful for loading the balance traffic, providing some of the security features like SSL termination, cache server responses, and all, right? So cache, you can see that caching the data from the internet to reduce bandwidth uses is one of the very key use cases you'll see for forward proxy. And for reverse proxy, when the caching the data from the servers, will be happening to speed up the entire response time. So that will and reducing the load on the backend server. So that is another use case for, when with respect to reverse proxy. From a protocol transmission perspective, this can translate protocols with respect, example, HTTP to HTTPS for any kind of an outgoing request and all, where here it could be handling all your SSL termination and translating all your HTTP requests, right? So these are some of the differences, when you want to go for a forward proxy versus which are, when you want to go for a reverse proxy kind of a scenario. So these are the two main types of proxies that we have, which primarily you'll see in majority of the cases. Now, in addition to them, there could be some other kind of proxies that you can also see, which would be useful in these different scenarios. Now, what are those different types of proxies that you have? So one of these proxies that you have is a transparent proxy. Now, transparent proxy is primarily being used when you want to centralize your entire network traffic. For example, if the use case is more with respect to centralization of all this request and the response to of these network traffics together. So that is where you will be using a transparent proxy so that it can try to monitor, it can control the network traffic, right? So they primarily might not be providing any kind of a user anonymity because it would be request and the response will be coming in. So the proxy filters will be applied for caching and filtering aspects you'll see. So that is more where transparent proxy is being utilized, but the user anonymity might not be a use case that you will be able to see. Then you also have some of the other kind of proxies, like for example, you have proxies like anonymous proxy, right? So anonymous proxy is another kind of a scenario you can think of where what you have is in anonymous proxies, you'll see that, the anonymization of my proxy will happen, right? So you'll see that the client's IP address and all will be getting concealed, right? So for privacy enhancements and to block out some contents and all. So you can see that I want to have an anonymization of my proxies available. Then there are other kind of proxies that are there, like for example, SOX proxies, right? Now, SOX proxies are those proxies where you'll see that, we are these SOCs which are there, which will be useful for processing the traffics from your the web traffic, the UDP traffic, the DNS lookup operations and all. So that is all will be done by using a SOX proxy kind of scenarios, right? Now, what is, we have seen your virtual private networks or, the VPNs, right? The VPNs, virtual private networks and proxy servers, right? So are they the same thing? Are they different two different things, So Wilson, spend some time to just understand about what are the key differences between them and, whether they are same or whether they are different. Now, both primarily are serving. So from a similarities perspective, if you see your proxy servers and what are the similarities between them? Like for example, you'll see that both are serving as intermediaries, right? So both are since serving as intermediaries between the communication, between the requesting device versus the internet and all. So you'll see that there are different levels of privacy and security that they would be providing, right? Now, if you see your proxies, so on one side you have the proxies, So these proxies primarily will be acting like a gateway. They would be rerouting the traffic, right? At the same time, you can see that it would be, we have seen that they are also able to conceal my user location and connections information, right? So all of this is something that is possible from um, your proxy servers. So it will also try to, um, you can also try to alter the IP address, the original IP address that you have of your client, right? So that is that, but primarily this is one there, right? So the proxy is trying to hiding the user location. The proxy will be able to the information that is being sent and received may be able to be intercepted, right? So this is primarily done at my application level, individually on my application level, and there are some specific configurations that I can look into. These specific configurations, can be useful for, I can start having to use it. So that is where you're having your proxy servers identified. Whereas your VPNs on, when you have your VPNs, what these VPNs does is they might be created more and encrypted, right? So it's more like an encrypted layer or encrypted communication between the devices that you will have within your requesting versus your the VPN server that you have, right? So this primarily provides 100% encryption, right? So you have a very high level of encryptions over there, and you will see that these VPNs are more useful. They might be safeguarding the requesters informations, the clients uh, user data. They might be safeguarding it from any kind of intrusions, potential intrusions that might be happening, right? Or interceptions that you might be having, right? So they would be trying to safeguard against that. Now, what it also does is because of these kind of capabilities, it is providing me enhanced privacy protection capabilities, right? So I can basically start using for comprehensive privacy protection because the user location, the content, and all is something that is being identified, being uh, safeguarded, you can say. Now, if you see from a perspective, so the proxies are providing me more caching capabilities, you know. So because of which, the acceleration is being increased, right? Which VPN you'll not say that there is no caching, because of which there might be that. So here the more concern is with respect to my sensitivity and protection of that information, right? So you'll see that proxies are more useful where sensitivity and security is not so much important, but performance is more important for me. So performance, you'll see that, those kind of things, you'll see that it is there. And here the more sensitivity is more important, right? Sensitivity of the data and all, so there is there, so that would be there. So VPNs are more secure, VPNs are more, used in your corporate kind of setups because you can define your policies and all very easily, that would be done using that. So these are primarily, you can see the traffic encryption is coming in your VPNs, which is not there in your proxies. VPNs are more secure, the proxies might be less secure in that way there. Here, these VPNs are more working at a system level. Here, you can see that they might be working more at an application level for the proxies. And this is more useful, as we have seen, for your HTTP request and all. Whereas you'll see that, the VPNs would be more used for uh, all types of traffics or all kinds of traffics. So these are some of the differences between your proxy servers and VPNs. Now we also have something which is on which is similar to your VPNs and things. So we will also try to understand what are the differences different. Now these proxies that you have, right? A lot of times organizations will be using these proxies for some specific kind of a use case, which is more with respect to your secure web gateways, right? So what are these secure web gateways and where these proxy servers, right? So this whenever the proxy servers are being used for secure web gateways, you'll see that they are providing a lot of, since security is something that we are not having it in your proxy servers by default, the focus is not there. So what we can do is we can provide a kind of a secure inspection of my HTTPS request coming in, right? At the same time, with respect to your web content filtering and your inspections that you want to have, or malware protections that you want to have, malware preventions that you want to have. So all of this is something I might be having my proxies, but because these proxies, I will use something which is my secure web gateways, SWGs, in addition to my proxies, right? So what we'll do is, uh, as part of my these aspects, you can see that the proxies might be inspecting the web-based traffic, but you'll see that as part of an overall strategy, I might start using a more like a secure web gateways in addition to these things, proxies I can use. And from a tunneling perspective, I can have these IP security, IPsec, and the tunneling components built in, or let's say, for example, the firewalls, port forwarding components added that can also start making this entire layer more secure. So that is something that you'll see, additional to your these components that is being used together. Then additional to this proxies, the security inspections and all is also something that is being there. So you also can apply or use a component which is your secure access service edge, which is your SACE in short. It's a more of an approach where the SACE would be providing you a better networking security capabilities that might be required. So SACE is as the SACE architecture is a more where you are trying to combine both your networking, your security, as service kind of functions. There's a single cloud delivered service that you can have at a network edge. And normally you'll see that you have them across your cloud kind of aspects to which you can implementing these becomes much easier. So normally if you try to see this kind of approach, the SACE kind of an approach that you have, it also provides a kind of a better way of handling this, so that basically gives you some aspects of how you want to look into the request, how you want to process those requests very easily. That is something you will be able to manage that request and manage that these components much easier in this kind of an architecture. So how does the SACE framework works? So what are the key components of your SACE framework, and what are some of the key ways of looking at this? So SACE architecture, if you see, the model, if you look at this model, typically if you see, it has simplifies the entire, simplifies the overall complexity which has, but primarily there are different key goals which SACE architecture tries to achieve. One of the main goal is primarily, you know, to transform this into transform and provide a lot of cloud-based capability, right? So you have a consistent state of cloud-based capabilities that could be deployed when and where they have been needed, right? So it's a kind of we are trying to establish a kind of a perimeter around where we are trying to have these different security applications and all which we can do. And it also provides a good high performing, high performing dynamic network capabilities because of which it can keep on adapting to some of your business requirements and evolving landscape. So you can start using these as part of your right. Now these same the SAFe framework that you have, there are key different components as part of your overall SAFe framework, right? So there, I mean, as you have seen that there is a, what we are trying to do is we are trying to have my secure access service edge defined. So it requires to have certain kind of key components that will be ensuring, that will be making it sure that whatever we are defining or what we are are creating or whatever we are using is compliant to the SAFe framework that we have, right? So for ensuring this is being achieved, what we require to have, we require to have certain key components. Now, what are these components? You'll see that the as we are trying to consolidate these various functions and capabilities into the products, right, into the minimal products that we have and some key components. So there are minimal products and services that we want from the number of different types of providers. So we want to have some essential technological components, right? Now, one of these component is your SWG, which is your secure web gateway that we have seen, wherein what we will be seeing is it will be doing a lot of this URL filtering, SSL decryptions. You have the entire application controls. You have your threat detections, preventions, threat preventions, right? All of this is something that I will do it into my SWG layer. Then you also have firewall as a service. So firewall as a service, since it is a cloud native kind of a service that we might use. So you'll see that it will give me firewall capabilities and the latest next generation kind of firewall capabilities, it will be there. So across your all OSI layer, OSI 7 layer, right? So across all the 7 layers, it would be able to provide this firewall capabilities. Then you have the access controls built in. It can provide me that the threat detection and prevention aspects, right? So that is also something that it will be able to provide very easily. Then you also have the cloud access security broker. So CASP primarily can start overseeing all your sanctioned and unsanctioned SaaS applications. So this broker is a more like a security broker, right? So it will be providing all your detection, malware, and threat detections capabilities. It will be able to provide. Then it also provides DLP capabilities, so data leakage preventions and all. It can provide that no data is moving out, sensitive data is moving out. So it's a more of a security broker that can give us these capabilities. Then we also have the zero trust network access, the ZTNA, where the continuous verification and inspection capabilities is something that it would be able to give. So that is also you'll see, which will be something that will be provided. You can start enabling your continuous verification and inspection capabilities very easily. And, it will be providing your identity-based, application-based policy enforcements. So this policy enforcements that you have could be providing access to the sensitive data and applications. Right? That is that. Now, in addition to this, you have the software-defined network architecture. So this SDW-WAN primarily is a kind of a network overlay that you have, right? So this network overlay is decoupled from the underlying hardware. It can start providing all your capabilities, securing the traffic across them. So all those pieces is something that, again, it could be easily done to let's say an architecture layer that we will be having, right? So this also has a lot of these benefits across, some of these components that you have, right? So these are some of the things which is more with respect to the web proxies, the overall proxies, right? Now, how exactly these proxies work or how basically you set up these proxies. We'll spend some time to understand how the proxy works, or how do you basically, what are some of the steps that you might be taking to set up these proxies, the web proxies. So if you see, since this web proxy is having its own IP address, right? Now, here it is acting like a mediator, right? So it's a between your machine, the internet that it has, right? So since it knows the IP address and it is routed. So normally there are different connections that you try to have. So get starting with a proxy server. We will try to configure this in your computer, on your server, on your device. It could be a phone, mobile phone also, right? On this, we'll first try to configure the settings that you have. Now, each of these operating systems will have its own network setup procedures. There are techniques and steps that are being useful to, most setup might be through you can have a direct tool, like a VPN tool is there, proxy tool is there, which would be you just or set it up easy using the defined steps. So it is there, but in case if you want to do it specifically, mentioning what is the IP address, or manually if you would have some details you want to enter, specifically what is the appropriate port, what is the details and all, is something that you want to do it very specifically. That is also something that could be done. So that could be, more like a manual custom installations or custom setup that would be done. Now there are softwares that also provides these proxies for a monthly fee. So there's a monthly subscription based solutions also available that can gives you these proxies. Sometimes these are free ones, which are also the free versions which are there. But what happens is the free versions will have some limited capabilities and all. So software proxies are primarily, you'll see that being hosted by these providers or might be residing in some kind of a cloud, and you can start installing it. You can get it, have it set it up through these steps that are there. And you'll see that all the different filters and whatever the customizations and all is something that you can start building it as part of your layers, right? So there are some things that you will be these things aspects that you will be looking in. Now, we were looking into some of these proxies that are there. Now, some of the other types of proxies which are very specific to your, the use cases. So let's say, for example, for a data center perspective, so I might use a data center proxy, right? Where these are might not be affiliated by with your ISPs, internet service providers, but they are being provided by some of the other external vendors to my data centers, right? So these proxies will be sitting within my physical data center, and all the user requests are being routed through that server, right? So it is primarily more with a specific to a data center. Now, these data center proxies are suitable for organizations or for your data center kind of use cases where, um, quick response time is something that I want from my data center, because the data center is not only handling a request from a specific use case and people. So here we will start, having, start want to have a more of a better experience from a specific set of users and all, right? So that is because there's a large number of requests that is coming in, and I want to get a better, response time to, to get, all these aspects about it, right? So these are, these kind of things is something that you can start using. There would be a high level of anonymity between the data centers. Multiple people would be starting, but I data center exact locations and all is something that might not be able to there. Then based on that, other types of use cases where I might be using it for my residential kind of an use cases, I can also have like a residential proxy. So residential proxies are primarily where suited for a single building or apartments or user, where you want to block some certain kind of cookies, or some unwanted ads. Like where for a specific group, specific group or specific individual kind of use cases that you have. Then you have these residential proxies. All this kind of, you want to block these cookies, unwanted ads and all, right? So this would be a more trustworthy kind of, because here you are trying to apply certain kind of filtrations, content filtering, and all of these, right? So that is something on a residential proxy, something. Public proxies are just open to all. Anyone can be, would be able to use, but again, it becomes a very, kind of high risk kind of things that you have, those aspects. There is one of the other proxies that you have, which is your, just like you have reverse proxy, similarly, you have something like a rotating proxy. The rotating proxy, what happens is rather than having a single IP address, so there is a kind of a rotating, so there is a different IP address to each of these users will be getting assigned, right? So as these users are connecting, they are given an address which is more like uh, different from the others. So these are where there is a huge high volume or continuous web scraping kind of use cases. So in those kind of uh, aspects, you will see these, the rotating back proxies might be useful. So they might be able to provide you when to reach out, what is the kind of, when do you want to get into contents, when you want to filter out these contents, that is something that you might be using as part of it. Now, as we have seen about these different, these proxies which are there, right? So you can, the cooking information, the session states can be very much useful by. There are certain kind of examples that I want to just mention about some of these solutions which are very common when it comes to proxies, right? So one such kind of a example is one of your projects that you had. So some set of users had come in, which is primarily a Zap. So what is the Zap kind of a project? So Zap is more where it's a kind of a open project which was being utilized by a set of users. So which primarily is being supported. So for the app scanner perspective. So I'll just share that. Again, it's an open web application protocol that you have. Just something I can just finish. So you can see this project Zap. So you can see that it's a project Zap which is there, which has different components. So this is the GitHub page for it. It has all these different aspects, right? So this project Zap primarily, was one of the solutions which are the things which be useful for cooking information, session rate trackings and all. So this is one way, one kind of a solution that is available. You also have something which is a port trigger. So this is primarily again, you have these different solutions within them. Port trigger has access, attack surface visibility, application security testing, penetration testing, bug bounty hunting, compliance check, automatic scanning, DevSecOps, and all. That is something that is there. You can check all the other solutions which is there from them. So burp is again one of the things where you have multiple set of solutions, and there you have your proxies. The web proxies is also one of the key options. So this is again where a vendor it provides a lot of these. You can see and check their documentations also that is available. That also helps to understand there are certain kind of labs and all. Then there are other websites like, for example, W3 website, W3 group of users also has something called as a W3F, right? So this W3F primarily is also an open project which was being there, and it is also as part of your scanning web application attacks and audit perspective, it is also something that is used being used. So it's an open source web application security scanner that you can see, all your developers and penetration testers then identify and start using this. So all the documentations and all is being available. So it is also able to provide different types of vulnerabilities, cross-site scripting, SQL injection, operating system commanding, and all of this is something that you'll be able to see. Then there are some of their solutions, like for example, there is a solution which is called as Fiddler. So Fiddler is provided by Telerik. So you can see that, again, across your operating systems, different operating systems, it has different solutions. So you can check this as also as one of the solution which provides these different. So you can see different tools which are there. Ever classic everywhere, cap and core and modules are there, and then there are different. So you can check the documentation for each of them here. The different documentation provides you all the different details, traffic analysis, and so there's another thing. Then you have for web scrapping perspective, there is a open source project from OSAP or WASP, which is your web scarif project. So here also you can see this OWASP project is also being useful, for your web identification, communications across your web proxies communications. You can see different components within them. We can see that HTTP protocol setup and having those understanding is something that it will be useful. So out of this, you can see the ZAP is also could be there. Scanning web application vulnerabilities actively, passively, and all is all something that it provides. Uh, brute force directories and all you can see. So each of these they have multiple capabilities on this that could be useful in this. Okay, so we'll spend some time in the OWASP, the security project. It's a big security project which has brought in a lot of these frameworks in place. So we'll spend some time in looking into each of them, understanding what are the key differences, what are the key aspects across each of them. Okay. So how this OWASP project is very unique and what are the key capabilities it provides across? So I think we'll take a small break now. And before we start with the OWASP project and understanding the capabilities it provides, so we'll take a small break in this. So first topic that we have done is mostly on the web proxies. I've explained you what are the different types of proxies, what are the some of these different components that you have across your different layers. We have seen, so that is something we have seen this. And then we have also seen some of these components, across these different layers, what are different proxies there, how do you basically stop avoiding them, what are some of the solutions in that. Now we'll see that now in the second part after break, once we come back, we'll spend some time in understanding the OWASP project. What are some of the key different, what is the standard all about? What are the key benefits and framework components that it has, right? And, what are some of the regulatory concerns which is there, which is being, provided by the OWASP project? And how what are the key contributions that was OWASP provides as part of your entire security complex. Okay, so we'll take a small break for 10-15 minutes now and we'll come back, and then what we'll do is we'll start looking into my OWASP project and we will try to spend more time in this entire.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So let's take a quick 15-20 minutes break and then come back. I think once we back, once we'll continue with this. Okay.
Sure.
All right. Cool. Thanks. Okay, welcome back. So what we'll do is we'll continue now with the remaining things. Let me just share
Okay.
my screen. Yes, so these were some of the things that we were looking into Hitler. Let me just close down. Okay. Now the second thing that we'll do is we will spend some time in understanding the OWASP security architecture, the security project that we have. Now, primarily, this was one of the main key, community that is keeps on bringing up with a lot of these security aspects, security articles, security, methodologies, frameworks, aspects, documentations aspects. So it's a kind of you can consider it's a more like, a kind of a free and open um, way how you can start accessing these resources, different types of resources for. So there's a non-profit organization which is, OWASP, which is taking this, the OWASP Foundation, which is trying to bring in the best of the security practices and all as part of a industry, setting up those things. So somewhere since 2001, you'll see that, this was being set up and um, that since over the period of years, so it has been coming up with a lot of different types of projects, so it has different types of publications, which some of the ones which are very popular. So we will see some of these ones now. So like, for example, you have the OWASP top 10 project, right? So where it will was trying to make more of an awareness about the different application securities that you have and what are some of the critical risk that has been the organizations keeps on facing. So this is one thing that you'll see which OWASP came out with, which the top 10 project, right? So that was one. So we'll spend some time in understanding that. Then we also have the OWASP software assurance maturity model, where it was speaking more about, the entire way how you can start measuring, and start analyzing and improve the entire software security posture, right? So the software security posture for organizations was something across the entire software securities, how you can start looking, right? So one of the key objective of this entire maturity model was also to create awareness and educate the organizations how they can start developing, designing, and deploying some of these, security software, security modules within the softwares as well. So this is another a kind of a model, which is the SAM model, right? So it's again very industry, accepted model. Then you also have the OWASP development guide, so a kind of a development reference. So primarily it provides more of a practical guidance and, different code samples it provides for the development of different application security. So application, developments, and within that you have the security features, what are the security aspects that it looks in needs to look into. So it tries to take care. So one of the key aspects that it speaks about is, let's say, for example, your SQL injection. So as we will be seeing in the coming in a few of the topics now from now. So there, how the SQL injection could be causing some of the concerns like phishing, script card handling, and all of this. So these are some of these things that you will be coming across as part of your OVA development guide. Just like you have the development guide, they also came out with the testing guide. So you also have the OWASP testing guide. which provides a kind of different types of testings. Like for example, penetration testing, so you have the penetration testing framework also, where the users would be able to implement penetration testing that they want to do, right? So, uh, what are the best techniques for doing that? How do you basically go ahead and looking into this application security issues and all? So that is where what it covers, the testing guide. Then once you have the development and testing guides, you also have some of the other components, like for example, the code review guide. So was also created with the code review guide as well. Yeah, sorry, was getting one call. I think one guy is coming. So the OWASP code review guide primarily was also being published by them, which started providing, with respect to what is the kind of a code review cycle that you have, right? So what is the code review process and cycle? It gave a kind of a reference guide and best practices that speaks about that. Then you have the OWASP application security. So this application security that you have, will give you more details with respect to, what are the security, uh, application security for standards that will be useful, right? So ASVS, that is the standard which tries to gives you these kind of best practices on this. Okay, just give me a minute. Yeah, so this application security verification standard, which is the ASVS, it also provides, what kind of application requirement security that you will be having. So the application level security verification is something that would be provides a framework around that. This is again something which is very popular. Then other specific projects it has, like for example, you have the OWASP top 10 incident response guidance. It provides a guidance, so what is the kind of an approach, how you would be able to manage your incident response planning and, taking care of the incident response aspect. So like this, there are different projects which it keeps on coming. And it also comes up with a lot of certifications also. So that is, you can see. So it is primarily in very short terms, it's a kind of a considers you as a kind of a organization which is working towards the betterment of the entire industry across this for the security perspective. So it keeps on coming up with these different types of frameworks and all as we speak, so that will be looking into some of these aspects. Now, the one of the popular ones that I was mentioning, we'll spend some time in understanding what are these OWASP top 10 kind of areas within it, because this is something that you'll see is will keep on getting referenced, will keep on getting looked into at a point in times. So this OWASP top 10 primarily, if you see, is more like it's a kind of a top 10 areas or top 10, critical risk which organizations might be facing in, and what are the key steps and what are the key, uh, you know, aspects that it will be needs to do. What are the key kind of controls that you can start looking into that you need to start putting in, right? So what are the key recommendations you can think of across each of these areas? So across what are these top 10 areas which OWASP primarily brings out is primarily. So first thing is you have, just give me a minute. So first area that you, what are the some of these critical security risks which is there as part of this project is what is your injections. Your it could be the injection attacks that might be happening. So we have seen what is the injection attacks, right? So where you are trying to insert certain kind of codes through some of these input formats or input mediums to an application. Like so for example, for typically it will be more with respect to your SQL injections only, but you could be see for code injections also. So that is one kind of a example, like your SQL injection attack, and you can try to prevent these. You can start where we'll see some of these in more details from now. Then you will have the broken authentications. So broken authentication is primarily the entire vulnerabilities which might be there in your authentication systems, and it will be, you can see that the attacker would be able to access your accounts. The entire compromise, the system gets compromised and all, right? So for example, all your username passwords, which is more with respect to usernames and passwords, right? So or the combinations that would be coming in during the data breach, or what kind of script that one will be using, right? So we have seen some of these, as part of the authentication, you can have multi-factor authentication, two-factor authentication, we can have rate limitings and all. We saw some of them yesterday as well. Then we have the sensitive data exposure as the third component. So understanding what is the data exposure with respect to the sensitivity aspects, right? So if the web applications are not able to protect their sensitive data, then the financial information, the passwords and all, then the attackers will start gaining access to this data. They will start selling it, utilizing it for some of the other purposes and all. So stealing the sensitive data, that is one of the other key aspects. Now, one thing that you can do is, we have seen some methods how we can start encrypting the data and disabling, right? So even sometimes we try to disable caching, right? So because we have seen that also like how caching will help. So sensitive data exposure, how what are the methods that would be looking into with respect to your sensitive data. Then we also there is another aspects which PAVAS primarily identifies and highlights is with respect to your XML external entities, your XE. So your external entities are more where there is a web application is parsing or more of a XML inputs, right? So, this input that will be there, it could be referencing your external entity, and, there would be an attempt that would be there. So you can see that there will be trying to exploit the vulnerability, so the external entity, would be more with respect to like your storage unit, or you can say like a hard disk and hard drive. So the XML parser would be duping this into the send packets, and there you can see that there would be an authorized external entity would be looking into it and pass this sensitive data directly to the attacker. So you'll see this XEE attacks, the external entity attacks coming in, where you'll see that there could be web applications might be, so you can try preventing them. Like for example, the web applications can have some kind less complex kind of a data. Like for example, you have the XML files or JSON files, right? So they will be least having these XML parsers and all. And we can just use it. Yeah. So XML or is, you will be able to see that which is more useful for your unstructured and web applications kind of use cases. And JSON is a kind of a type of those unstructured kind of where JavaScript object notation would be useful for transmitting this data, could be useful, right? So JSON is more language agnostic, and you can see that it could be being used interchangeably across multiple applications and programming languages. So very popular means, and these days being used across for data storage, data transmission, that is your JSON formats are getting very largely used. Then you also have the fifth area which OWASP highlights, which is your broken access control. So broken access control, as we have seen, the access controls wherein the authentication, and authorizations aspects, right? So how we are able to take care of those. So what are the access controls that we are putting in, right? What are the kind of authorizations and authentication controls that we put in? So these access controls are primarily can enable these attackers. You can try bypassing this authorization. You can start performing some of these tasks that might be privileged for some of these users. Like for example, you have the admin users, right? So this how this web application could be allowing the user to change these account details, and those aspects. That is something your access controls would be looking into. What is the kind of a request that would be coming in? What is the kind of a response that you might be getting in? Those kind of aspects would be taken care in this. Then you have the security misconfigurations. Is the sixth area which OWASP highlight. So security misconfigurations primarily will be, is a more of a vulnerability, which is more with result of any kind of a default configurations that you might be using. So let's say, for example, if there is any kind of a default configurations, or there is sometimes you are trying to make a lot of information additional. So you are using a lot of verbose in your, displaying a lot of verbose information, additional details. So in those kind of scenarios, there could be a security misconfigurations that might be happening. So, the user could be overly showing descriptive errors and all. It might reveal the vulnerabilities in the system. So you can see that one of the ways how this could be removed primarily is that you can start removing any kind of unused features which might be there in the code. You then, if there are any error messages and all which needs to be typically being shown. So you can start doing that. You can start showing that very easily. And that can basically avoid these security misconfigurations, that can resolve some of these issues in the security misconfigurations. Then the seventh area which OWASP highlights is as part of your cross-site scripting, your XSS that we mentioned, your cross, SS site scripting vulnerabilities. Now, these types of vulnerabilities normally, if you see, will be occurring when, the web applications are allowing more users to add a custom code into the URL part, right? So there is a cross-site across the sites, the communication is happening. And this vulnerability primarily would be more exploited. Let's say, for example, as part of your, you're able to run some kind of a malicious JavaScript code Let's say, for example, the attacker is trying to send an email to the victim, and that might be looking it as a trusted from some kind of website. But that website might be having some of these malicious code tagged into the. So that is where you will try to have protection against them, right? So you'll try to protect the website. You can try to identify the malicious code and try to resolve it. So that is primarily as part of your cross-site scripting. You would be able to do that. So you can use some of your strategies, like for example, you can escape your untrusted websites, untrusted HTTP requests, right? That is that you can try to avoid that. You can start validating some of your requests that is coming in, right? So validating and sanitizing, that becomes very much important, right? So all your user generated contents and all which is coming in, you can start validating, you can start sanitizing these contents. And then you can use some of your more secured frameworks, like for example, React, Ruby's, right? So these are all some of the web development frameworks which are more, providing this cross-site scripting capabilities and better security capabilities in these aspects. Then you also have some of the other components when it's there's eight area where OWASP highlight is your insecure decentralized serialization. So this threat which is there, the insecure decentralization is more targeting your many web applications. Like for example, some of these web applications might be frequently serializing, some of these the data aspects. So with respect to serializing and deserializing your data, it will be looking into those aspects. So serialization is more where, you're taking objects from so serializing is where a concept where you can taking the objects from your code, application code, and then you're converting this into a format which could be more usable, right? So in a code format, you are trying to convert them. That will be more useful for, the some of like storing the data to the disk or streaming the data. And reverse of that is your deserialization, where what you're trying to do is we are converting this serialized data back into objects and then, convert them into objects so that the application can start using it. Right. So this is primarily where you have a serialization and deserialization. A easy way to understand serialization is like, for example, if you're trying to pack your furniture, into boxes when you're trying to move out from, let's say, from you want to plan to move your house from one place to another, or you're planning to do a shifting, house shifting and all, right? So what you do is you're trying to pack your furnitures into boxes, right? Before you're moving, right? So that's your serialization. You're converting them into packets into a streams. And then deserialization is just the opposite, unpacking. So when you reach the target, you're just unpacking those boxes and you're trying to assemble this furniture back. So now this is something where uh, the security aspect has to be there because the communication, the transmission of these packets has to be with whatever the furniture that you have packed in has to go. Otherwise, there is a possibility of theft happening, right? So if it is unsecured, then then what will happen is some of these mover and packers they can start tampering with your contents and they might start stealing some of your contents. So that is what your insecure deserialization will happening. They will try to take out data from while the data is moving across. There could be some of your denial of service kind of attacks that can start happening. So those kind of things you'll see that, could be exploited by the attackers. They can start, playing around with the underlying data sets and they can start, compromising them. Now, what are some of these components that you can start with? The aspects. So the ninth area which OWASP highlights is primarily your components or use some of these components which are having or which are having known vulnerabilities, right? So most of your modern, the developer platforms and all, like that, it has some of these libraries and frameworks, right? So these libraries and frameworks that you have, right? They are primarily there in your web applications, right? In your web apps that you have, right? Now these components are, will start helping your developers. It can help avoid redundant work and, sometimes whatever the needed functionality is there, right? So for example, you have these front-end frameworks, right? Like Ruby, React and Ruby on Rail and all, right? So they have smaller libraries that they can be useful. So what attackers normally they try to look in, they try to look for some of these vulnerabilities, right? Which can then be useful for orchestrating these attacks, right? We have seen this. So now, what they try to do is they try to identify some of these, and so normally these component developers they will try to execute some of these security patches continuously. You'll see that there are security patches that are being applied on continuous basis. They will try to update. So in case if they identify a potential vulnerability in the application, they will try to patch it out or they will try to bridge that. This will basically useful to minimize the entire risk of, whether you're running components with vulnerabilities or, you should be removing these components from there. So because of which, there would be a possibility that, you receiving components from a trusted source or ensuring that whatever the communication that you're getting is up to date. And so these are some other kind of an aspects, which is you are trying to use known components and not like some of the components which we are not very sure of. Then the other component is with respect to insufficient logging and monitoring. Now, insufficient logging and monitoring is where, so a lot of some of these web applications might not be taking enough steps. So, for example, what is the average discovery time as one of our key performance parameter? What is the average discovery time for the breach? Right. So, so how if let's say for example it is X, can it be further optimized to bring it, optimize it to make it more reduce this? Because a lot of time what happens is the discovery time, the attackers might be getting a lot of time because before you start discovering and before you start putting in the next steps or the controls, the attacker should be in a position that should be able to make the damage or whatever the necessary data sets and all they want, they should be able to capture that. So the developers should be able to implement a logging and monitoring aspect as part. So what OWASP mentions is as part of your incident response plan, you should have this logging and monitoring built in, wherein it will be ensuring that, these what are these attacks that is happening and what are the key controls that will be happening, right? So if you see, these are the top 10 uh, these are the top 10 recommendations that is coming from OWASP, right? And, these are across the vulnerabilities which are seen in the industry. And, it would be where the web developers who would be creating applications or the, websites, they should be highlighting, they should be taking them into consideration. So what are these 10? So the first one starting with injection, which more it's all about the command, SQL injections and all aspects. Then we have broken authentication where it speaks about, a lot of breakage in your authentication and session management aspects. What are the identity compromises and all account impersonation aspects that it happens. Third being the sensitive data exposure. So it speaks about your PII, PHI aspects, how they are, if they are not inadequately protected, might be resulting in some of these unintentional disclosures for these data sets. Then you have the XML external entities, the double XE, where you can use it for referencing the external entities. resulting in more unauthorized access through sensitive content and remote code execution. So that is more with respect to your XML external entities. Now you'll see this uh, used for referencing the external entity. There could be resulting in unauthorized access to sensitive content and remote code execution as well. That could be useful as well. Then we have the next component, which is more with respect to your the broken access controls, right? So what are some of these broken access controls and improper access control enforcements, if not there, can lead to some of the illegitimate operations like viewing and modifying the restricted contents, and or let's say, for example, accessing the data from some of the other accounts. Then you also have the security misconfigurations, right? The sixth one, sorry, where it speaks about the default configurations, which are more commonly that could cause a lot of vulnerabilities, like the default device passwords, not restricting the administrative views for people, and what kind of excessive details that you start putting it in the error messages, right? Then the cross-site scripting, the seventh one, which is where, the cross-site vulnerabilities that will be there that can be useful for running these malicious scripts, right? And then we also have the insecure deserialization. So primarily that would be useful for converting the data from string to binary formats, and, like the web application logics that would be useful, right? So we saw this example of movers and packets to understand how the insecure deserialization can be causing harm. Then the ninth one being using the components with known vulnerabilities. So the attackers, how they would be taking advantage of the software components and trying to get access to these target servers and try to view the sensitive data. What are the library vulnerabilities that might be used to exploit as well. Then insufficient logging and monitoring. So anything from the inadequate log retentions or not having appropriate tools like SIM or log monitorings and all to getting notifications about suspicious events and all. So it can be leading to a lot of sensitive data exposure, manipulations, or system compromise. So that you're required to have a proper incident response plan for all of it, right? So you'll see those of them. Now, from the exams perspective, if you see, these are the ones which are, the few ones which are being highly focused out of this. All 10 are not being taken, being focused on. So SQL injection, you have the XSS, the cross-site scripting, then you have the cross-site request forgery, the CSRF. Some of these are something which is there, the account harvesting, that is something these are being largely being focused on. That is being there. So you can also use this as a reference in case you want to have this. So this GitHub project is very useful. It has all this documentation for this. So what are these top 10 ones which are
Yeah.
there? And
Saurabh, I have a query. I think like the ones which you explained, the top 10 is like these are looks like they might be old, like 2017 ones, and in 2021 they have updated like couple. So now the exam focuses on the updated ones or the like the old ones, like that's where means all obviously like most of
correct,
these are
correct,
like
correct.
the same in the
Yeah.
21 as well.
So exactly, exactly. No, no. So what you mentioned is right. So if you see, this came out somewhere in 2017. So I was coming on that. So this was the one which is in 2017. Now, which of them are there in 2021, right? So for example, broken authentication. So you have this as the one, So let me just list it down. So I will just be able to tell you. I'll tell you. So for example, you have first, which is your broken access control. We have seen that. Then the second one, which you have, is primarily your cryptographic failure. So this is something that came in as an additional thing for your cryptographic methods, and cipher methods. Then you have third one, which is injection, which is more like injection, a SQL injection. That is all something that is there within 2017 module also. Then we have the security designing aspect, the architecture design, which is your insecure design, which primarily the authentication aspects that we have looked into, the security misconfigurations, right, and the design aspect. Then the next is the security misconfigurations, which we have seen it, which is there in your 2017 module as well. What are the configurations that you have seen in, how you are doing able to do that configurations. Then sixth one being the outdated components, right? So the vulnerabilities that you have, and some of them which might be outdated. So how you are able to take care of them. Then we have the identification and authentication failures which are there, right? So this is also something we have seen it as part of my the authentication modules that we have seen, the broken information. Then we also have the software and data integrity components. There is more with respect to your application codes and the infrastructure that with respect to the softwares that right the digital signatures and all is will come under this. Then we also have the security logging and monitoring. So that is also there as part of my previous centric model. So that is remaining same as well. And server side request forgery is again something that we have seen. So like for example, uh, you can say that with respect to without any kind of a proper authentication validation of these resources, how we can trying to use these vulnerabilities, we can start using these applications across these. Right? So you can see there's a lot of ones which are similar. Cryptographic method has been come in, primarily as a new one. We have the other ones which are like digital signatures and softwares which were not there very clearly previously. So now you have that very clearly mentioned. Now some of the what you ask is that is true actually, whether it's the old ones or the new ones. So see from the exam perspective, these are there are only very few ones which are quite popular. The ones which are as part of the think these are all are there, but they primarily looked into some of the ones like SQL injections or cross sites and these, the some of the methods which are there, with respect to your insufficient logging monitoring, some of these components, the security software's data integrity aspect. So both of them, all of them are there, but they try to, focus on few of these ones which are there.
Okay, yeah, thanks. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll also go through those as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. See, the ones which are there, they will try to focus on few of them, and they'll see. Now, just let me stop sharing for a minute. Just trying to check for a one logging into something. Just
No worries. Yeah.
there is this one other good resource that you can utilize. Let me share my screen. So this is multi-day. Mutely Day, which is again one of an open source resource that is primarily useful for your vulnerable web application target perspective. So you can use it, you can download it, and then you can practice all your, hacking the web application or, providing cross-siting scripting, SQL injection, response fitting, HTML injection, and all, right? So that is it. So it's a documentation which gives you what are the ones that it supports, which of the applications or operating system it supports. There are certain steps which have been shown how you can install it across your Docker's containers and use it. So it's a very detailed across these different methods that would be there. Now this has been also tried and tested with a lot of these different types of attacks that are being there are some of the other tools which are being there, right? So Bobside, Web Inspect and all, which is supported. So you can use it as a practice or, for exploiting a lot of these cross-shell scripting, site scripting and all. So that could be useful. That was primarily the latest one is also there. You can use it. And it basically supports built on top of these vast top 10 principles that is there. So if you see normally all these are being built in within multi-day. So multi-day, normally if you see across the controls that it will be having, right? So in that, what it will be seeing is it gives you the option, which is the one that you want to see, which are the ones that you want to go through, so there is an option within multi-day. I have a previous instance where I had used it. Let me just share you an image of that. Okay, so here you can see that across your A1, A2, A3, A4, A5, A6, A7, A8, you can select what is the sum of the things that you want to do. You can select that and you can look that, and you can basically take those necessary configurations from there and setting it up. You can verify this vulnerability. You can execute this.
Okay.
Okay. Now what we'll do is we'll spend some time in understanding each of them one by one. So what are these some of these methods which are there? We'll take some time and going through all of them one by one. So what we'll do is we can take a small break now. It will take some time to go through all of them. So let's come back and then what I'll do is go through each of them one by one. What are some of these methods? And then I think that is whatever we are able to cover today, we'll cover. And whatever the remaining ones, I think that we can just take it ahead because anyways, we will have to take the access aspects and the tunneling aspects and all. We are always taking it separately. So I think yeah, that is something that we'll do. So let's take a quick break. I think once we are back, then I will start with each of these in more detail, covering understanding each of them with the different
Okay.
methods.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, welcome back. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go through each of these different topics, some of these in different interesting topics across some of the key models that we have as part, not only with respect to those vast models, top 10 models, but in general, which is also there under OWASP principles, some of them, and some of them are in generic, which are important from the GCIH components perspective, right? Now, the first component within that we have is nothing but your account harvesting as an area, right? So account harvesting is something that becomes very much important to understand because as you know, account harvesting, is just like it is also called in another words, you can say that it's also being very popularly called as username harvesting, right? Now, this primarily also, which is the username harvesting, will be a lot of times the attackers would be trying to, have your username harvested, because of a specific purpose that they want to do. So your login credentials also gets included in this, so they would be harvesting this, there would be some different types of principles that they might use. Like for example, that obviously identity theft being one of the more popular ones. But then you can also see that during the financial, data access that they have, they will start getting these, right? So normally different types of methods, like identity theft is one of them. Like for example, during phishing also they are able to get access to a lot of these details. So phishing scams and malwares, or for example, social engineering for that matter, you know. So how these details have been taken in, to deceive these individuals, there, because of which the ground credentials is being taken in. So they will use some of these aspects like your fake websites would be created, fake websites through which the data would be taken in, the deceptive emails would be being sent, to which the details would be being taken in. Or let's say, for example, even through your software vulnerabilities, also, you'll see that these are being also leveraged or these are being exposed to, start getting in. Now, phishing being one of the very common aspects, right? We have seen some, so for example, we have seen some of these aspects when across my phishing account harvesting we will be trying to do. I will, is one of these things we will try to, what I'll do is I'll try to send or receive some of these. I will create some deceptive emails or will create some deceptive websites. And through that, I will be able to, take in this information, right? So, through them, I want to get in these details, I can create some fake websites. I can create them as similar to as close as possible to the real one. So I will not be able to understand. And then when we have seen that how the users would be able to enter their login credentials, so this information is then being kept. So that is one of the very common methods where it is being used for account harvesting. Then malwares, are also one ways where these are primarily being installed, on the machines, on the devices, and this would be recording all your keystrokes. They might be capturing some screenshots as you're doing. So these credential screenshots gets captured, and they can also try to monitor your traffics as well, right? So monitor your traffic, network traffic, and then they can start capturing these login credentials and all. Is also one of the other way. Then you also have the social engineering aspects, where also you'll see there is a kind of a manipulation of individuals to they would be tricked to disclose their information. So you will see that um, how these attackers will try to deceive and will ask people to start revealing their credentials and all. Like for example, on behalf of someone, fake profiles would be created and all, or getting the access of your friends through which they will try to get these details, or So these attackers will try to, try to be half act on behalf of someone and capture the social mood and will try to have. So this has been there over the years, right? But over the time, with advancements in technologies, innovations, and all coming in, the attackers have tried to, have different other methods that they can start. Like for example, in the earlier days, we have seen about this shoulder surfing, where over the shoulders they would be able to surf and get the details. Or for example, the dumpster diving or methods that we have seen. So these are also other methods to which the login credentials have been taken care in or been taken have. So they will try to use these methods also. And there are a number of tools and technologies as we have seen. They have tried to being used. They have tried to use a lot of these methods together in cohesion, So that will be also being used in together. So one of the one key thing or aspect which organizations are doing as part of this is primarily a multi-factor authentication implementations, which almost all organizations is trying to implement this. Multi-factor authentication helps you to, restrict a lot of this. So primarily, these encryption protocols, once it gets built in, so because of which you can ensure that this is not happening, then you do a lot of these security audits and start protecting these things, right? So start once these individuals become vigilant and aware of a lot of these suspicious emails, so they can start regularly updating their passwords, right? So that is another very important aspect. Your password keeps on getting changed. Also, that also starts acting as a kind of a workaround, right? So you have these password managers and all that also could be ensuring a lot of account security, right? So as the technologies are also improving, you can see that there are ways how they have been trying to do it, and then now there are ways how there are counter methods also we are seeing, right? So that is one of the things. I think we have discussed another method that is password guessing also. That is another way, how the account harvesting is being done, that will be taking care of this. Malware, social engineering, all are the different types of methods, right? So different these methods in combination, a lot of times they will the attackers will try to have, right? So you will see that what are some of the ways, how you can start understanding whether, in case if there is any kind of attack, how your account harvesting has happened, So one of the key ways, what are some of the key signs that you can help you to diagnose or identify? Obviously, the softwares are all there, but sometimes for your individual, individual accounts and all, you might not have. So sometimes, you see these individual accounts has these notifications. Like for example, when Gmail is getting used in some other devices and all, so they will send you something that there's a suspicious login that has happened. So kindly confirm if it is you. Otherwise, you can report it. So that is where, these notifications and with the help of identification could be there. So it tells you directly whether there is any kind of those kind of things. So you can be very much aware. Like it may happen to me once, my account I was notified that someone had accessed and I'm not sure that I would not access it. Then I went ahead and changing that password of that account. So that is one thing. So password change is also that, sometimes there would be notifications that will come to you that says that, there is a request for password change. This is an OTP. So this is where you should not be changing and allowing them, because once it gets changed, then get a complete control access about that entire account, right? So that is something also you should be aware of and then not approve anything, right? Then the unusual activity is also underways. You can see that there is some kind of unusual activity happening. Like for example, login attempts happening multiple times. The one of the logic which organizations they do is like unfamiliar locations or some blocklisted countries and blocklisted places like Russia and all, through which there is a lot of these, VPNs and proxies are being used to log in. So you try to block them. So from a lot of these unfamiliar locations and all, which you feel that there is a very high potential. So you keep on tracking these. Okay. So that is there. Then the alerts based on that you define what are these alerts. Start sending some of these security alerts about the suspicious activities you try to do. Then you try to identify what are these unauthorized transactions which might be happening. Let's say, for example, there is also some notifications you'll get with respect to uh, some transactions that has been triggered from your account, but you're not aware. And that might be also showing that your account might have been compromised, right? There are certain kind of phishing emails, you know, uh, very specifically with respect to your account and all. So then you start seeing or some activities is happening in your account which you had not triggered. So those kind of other things is you'll be seeing, as part of your account harvesting also. You'll be able to see that these things will start, coming up. There are ways. So that is primarily, So what are some of the methods that you can do to prevent this? How you can try to prevent these account harvesting from happening? So preventive methods are primarily like, for example, we saw one which is multi-factor authentication, two-factor or multi-factor authentication. Not only like two, you can have multiple levels of authentication that can basically have that extra layer of security. This always helps because even after, having your OTPs, you have the authenticator app and all multiple levels of it. And sometimes you also, include the biometrics and all, right? So that also helps. So biometric level, adding that is something also helps in this or that. The next thing that you can do is encryption of their data. So even if there's some compromises are happening, once the data is encrypted, that also layers an additional layer. So data encryption helps because you can the intercepted data that is being intercepted, so you can basically ensure that they are not being easily read, or people even they will not be able to understand. So that will also lead to a prevention of data loss, right? Then you have some of your regular security scans that you can keep on doing. So regular security scans will help you to identify if there is any malware or if there is any kind of a spyware and all that is sitting on the machine. If there is any some suspicious activities on the network and all. So these security scans also help you identify them. One of the very important aspects is the training and awareness. Now, when it comes to organizations and even for individuals, you'll see that this is where a lot of institutions, the individual keep on training. Like, for example, RBI for that matter. Reserve Bank primarily keeps on mentioning people that don't trust, don't click and all. So that is a training for the general public, but don't share your OTPs and all. But similarly, in your organizations, you have for the organization, for the employees, you see there is a very some kind of mandatory trainings, mandatory learnings, which is there, which some of them will be more with respect to the security aspects, right? So they will train, not to click on any of these unknowns, not, have these attachments, open some of these attachments from unknown websites. These are something there. Then you also have to have some of your strong password policies in place, right? So that will also help you. So strong password policies will help, you can use complex policies and all. That also helps. That whenever you're creating or when you're using, that also helps as a combination, when we'll be using them. So that is also this complex password or password policies is also complex, unique passwords also helps, as part of this. So that is one things. Now, are there any kind of a risk in case if account harvesting happens? So obviously, there are two main key risks which is there as part of your account harvesting. So one is your legal risk, right? Because what happens is there are violation of privacy laws, there are violation of the state laws once account harvesting happens. So you'll see that there could be fines which might be there, data protection regulations if it is not being followed very rigidly. So there could be fines associated because the regulators and organizations, authority bodies might be charging those fines. So that is also very much important. There are legal risks associated, which will be needs to be taken care of or given priority. Then you also have some of your ethical concerns as well, from ethics perspective. So for example, people's see the attackers might be trying to capture these data points without having a consent from teams. A lot of times, what happens is even organizations intentionally try to do it to collect this information from users without the users not knowing about this, right? So this is not only like from a wrong perspective also, sometimes what happens is this is also being done intentionally to get the details of the customer, and when we'll try to provide them more details we can give them better services. So the intention might be good, but the way that the things have been done is not the right way, right? So because of this concern, it creates a lot of trust issues, violation of ethical standards, and that can ultimately create a lot of brand loss and reputational image, right? So you can see that this is one of the very important, disadvantage. Like for example, this happened with the Facebook example where, the profiles information of these Facebook customers were being shared with Cambridge Analytica, and there was, you'll see that, that was not, the customers were not even aware of it. So those kind of things will cause a lot of these ethical concerns, will cause a lot of these, other kind of concerns that might be impacting these attackers from getting it. So you can there are some of the sites that we have mentioned, some of the tools that I've mentioned, can be also used for account harvesting. Like for example, I was mentioning about this website called as Burp Suite. So this Burp Suite primarily has ways how it could be. You can see hands-on security testing. There is the vulnerable apps which are there, right? So in this, it basically shows you different ways that you can deploy, that you can employ, that would be useful for you know doing some kind of this account harvesting. So it gives you details, there's web pages and all where you can mention and you can try it out. So there are, let's say for example, when you're doing this, there are methods that would be there, that you can use it as part of your, just to test it out how it works and all. So that is something this could be done. Right? Now this is one of the methods. So as we have seen, how we are able to protect against the account harvesting, right? So we have seen some of these methods, right? So one of the factors, let's say I mentioned about, we have seen this, like for example, you have the captcha. So there is another layer of authentication that I can put in is the captcha, or better of just of checking that. I can start putting that as an additional layer of control that can help in the attacker to not able to identifying. Let's say for example, if it's a bot, or if it's a bot attack and all, then that is something that these attackers will not be able to identify very easily. Now, the second type of the attacks which have the web application attacks, which is there, which is very common, and is something that needs to be avoided, is primarily your SQL injections, your injection kind of an attacks. So SQL injection, as um, what is this and where exactly it is? It is there, right? So as part of my OWASP, the 10 top 10 priorities. So there are, even there are certain kind of methods which Ovas mentioned about it. And what are the ways how you can, what are some of the defenses that you can put in? What are some of the safe approaches that you can put in, right? So these are all something that mentions is being created or, it's mentioned as part of very clearly as part of, verbs, things. Now, as we have mentioned, right? So, like for example, the whole idea about why we want to have this kind of and SQL injection is where I want to have an kind of an attack. So the reason it is more like an injection is because you're trying to inject something into it. Like for example, we have injections for injecting medicines into our body. So here, what we are trying to do is we are trying to have an injection attack where I want to start executing malicious commands. Right? I want to start executing malicious SQL statements. I can start injecting malicious or wanted other programs which I want to have. And what I want to use is I want to, use these vulnerabilities to bypass some of these application security measures that we have, right? So what we want to do is, uh, you know, I want to have this SQL backend and SQL code as one of the means to getting into my systems, right? So I use it for my backend database manipulation. I want to start getting access to this information, that is there. So this information that would be included, that could be having the number of some of the details, like for example, the sensitive details of the customer organization and all it might be there in the SQL database, or SQL that will be there. So you can see all the user list, for example, all the customers list, their customer details and all very easily you would be able to get an access to the underlying data, because the attacker will might start getting admin rights to a database as well. So I can start looking into it. I can start, transferring or moving the data sets, right? So this is something which is very common. You'll start seeing that the attacker will try to transfer, amounts, from one of these, each of these accounts to the other accounts, or, they would be start putting them values, right? So one thing that you can see is, ultimately your money is digital money, right? It's in the form of numbers. Now you will be able to transfer an amount only if you have that amount in your account, right? So what you normally do is in this kind of an attacks, you try to try to modify the underlying data sets and you try to then use that for your account transfers. So once the amount is being transferred to the target, account or target bank, you can all they basically try to withdraw them and they try to use it. So all these are something that these attackers they try to do. It is not like it is just the impact would be felt in just like one go. There are series of steps that these attackers might do it one after the other, and that is where it's used in combination. It is used in combination for launching these kind of an attacks, right? So that is, you'll see that these injections would be, having these kind of details, that will be having. Now, what happens is, now once this is being done, you'll see there would be a kind of a combination of these attacks run together or will be hosted together. That would. So as we know that the SQL statements are very things. So let's say, for example, we have a simple SQL statement. Let's say something like you want to have specific items that is being needs to be selected. So let's say we have an e-store, and in this e-store we have something like item numbers, item descriptions, and all. Now, a simple SQL code would be something like a select item name, item description from the item table, where item number is equal to item number, something like a self-join that we are trying to do just to select it, or even if we don't mention a select clause that it will give me, or I'll give a row number. Now what I'll do is, I'll want to create a string query, that will be connected to it. So I can have this like a select query in this. Now, what happens is when I mention for a specific thing, I can give them this item number specifically as part of my, the web application is might be trying to pass this as an input based on what the user is trying to look into, right? So I will try to get this. Now, there is a very high chances that rather once I start getting more access to it, then I will be able to not only just select, but I will also try to insert values. I can also try to you know, reduce these amounts or increase this. I can change the underlying values as well. Now, different types of SQL injections are possible. So there are these different types of SQL injection that the attackers might be trying to take in. So what are some of these types of SQL injections that you have? So first type is more like an in-band kind of SQL injection. So these are primarily in-band is more the classic model that you have. Then you also have the inferential, which is also called as the blind method. And then we have the out of band. So these are primarily the different types of methods. So in band is where the same channel is being useful for communication to launch the attack as well as to gain the results. So in band is more simple and more it is a more common form of attacks. Now within this in band which you have two main subcategories within it. So you have someone which are your error-based fuel injections, and the other one that is more like your union-based SQL injections. So the error-based and you have your union-based. So error-based is more where the attacker is performing actions that can cause the database to produce some of the error messages, right? So the error outputs will come in. And here you can use that the attacker will try to potentially use this data from these error messages. They will try to gain more information about what is the structure of the database and all, right? So that is something that would be error-based SQL injections. Then you also have the union-based SQL injections. So this is more useful where you have some of these union statements, like you have union SQL operators, right? Which will be useful for joining this data from multiple outputs of the select statements, and then you can use it, right? So for example, you have one query which is getting select item name from item, then you want to union this. So where item number is this, you have the item number one. Then you want to use an union, which is select item name. Or let's say, for example, these are two tables which I did, so one is an item table, and then I have another from, Uh, another like a history table is there. Right, I want to basically join from both these tables into a single table, right? So I can use a join there, but at the same time, just join will basically do a kind of a matching map, which is matching. Here it is union where the output of A plus the output of B, it will be showing both of them together. So again, in union-based SQL injection methods also is another method. You primarily see your union SQL operators that will be from multiple SQL select statements that is coming in. You can use it. Then the second type that you have is the inferential SQL injection method. Now, why it is called as a inferential kind of a SQL injection method? Because the attacker will be sending payloads, and will try to observe the response and behavior of the server. So like, for example, the data is not transferred, from this website to the attacker. Primarily, the attacker cannot see what is the information the attack is there. Here, these blind SQL injections will try to rely on the response and the behavioral patterns of the server. So they are normally or typically much slower to execute, maybe just as harmful as well, you'll see. So these blind SQL injections could be also of different types. Okay, so just give me a minute. Yeah, sorry. So, yeah, now we were looking into the different types of inferential SQL, inferential or blind SQL based injection methods. Now, one of the thing that we have is primarily your Boolean based inferential. So, the instance is inferential SQL injection methods are using, a kind of a request and a response kind of a nature. So these are also the blind SQL, injection methods, right? So where the data is not being transferred, right, to the attacker. So what we have is the first step, which is your Boolean, where what happens is the attacker would be sending a SQL query, to the database. And based on that, it will try to get a result, right? So this result will try to vary based on whether the query is true or based on false. Now, based on that information, the information within the HTTP response will get modified or it will change, right? So that will where this message might be generated will be giving you like a true or a false result. Right? So that's a more like a Boolean kind of an true or based on like two values, one or zero or true or false kind of a output, having two set of values. Then the other type that you have is a more like a time based. So where the attacker might be sending like a SQL query to your database, and this there would be a kind of a wait. So the database will be having like a wait for a specific period, right? So before it can get resetted. So this is time based, So there is a specific wait time that is um, being passed on. And we hear from this time to time that database is trying to take this response. It will try to identify whether this query output is coming as true or false. Now, based on that result, the HTTP response, it will be generated. It would be sometimes it would be instantly generated, or sometimes there might be a waiting period also. So the attacker can just let understand if the message that they have returned, it is giving through a false return, right? So that is another kind of which is your SQL, injection, which is inferential SQL injection. The third type that you have is your out of band SQL injection. Now, in an out of band, what happens is the attacker might only be carrying out where certain features on the database server are being used by the web application. So, in those kind of scenarios, you see this out of band SQL injection. So here, these certain features, certain type of features are being only enabled, and you'll see that um, um, these are being enabled by the database server. So you'll see, okay. Now this kind of attack is primarily more useful for this kind of scenarios, So the attacker is you don't want to use the same channel, right? So it cannot use same channel to launch the attack. And what happens is it wants to basically just launching the attack or gathering the information, it cannot have the same information. So, that will be there. Or let's say, for example, it knows that the server is too slow, or it is like unstable for all these actions, right? So in those kind of scenario also, you'll see that the out of band SQL injection methods are being used. So this kind of method, this will be counting on the server to create DNS or HTTP kind of a request, based on which they would be useful for transferring the data to another attacker. So this is again a very popular method or an example which is there, right? So in this example, now I will try to have an injection. Like for example, in my previous example, I will was mentioning this is a specific item number. Now, what the attacker will try to write is, there would be non-validated input vulnerabilities that we can start looking in, right? So in this, I can start putting in along with this item ID, one item ID which is not there. Like say, for example, something like 1.1. So it will not start getting any kind of a result and it will start giving a zero response. Just a small example on that. The examples could be as complex, they will try to give an input which is being fed in from some other website. So let's say, for example, since they will be getting more access, right? So let's say they will start creating or inserting records or updating records. So once they look into this, they can start putting in new entries. They can start more filtered. They can start to block, jam the entire request. Like for sometimes you see that there is a specific request that is coming with an item number now. Now I don't want this to be like this. I want the entire database to go in a more like in a non-performance state. So what I will do is the query I will modify. I will do something like a cross join for that matter, which is like might take in a lot of time. And if this data are more like transactional data, which has huge volumes, millions of records. So when you perform a kind of a cross join, then in that case, that data table will be getting impacted. So there are different types of methods, as part of the SQL scripts and all. So uh, you'll see that this was something which the attackers normally try to have use it. Okay. Now, one industry case which was very popular as part of your SQL injection, which got a lot of prominence or noticed was your Axelian, right? So Axelian is a primarily a file transfer application appliance which created this. Now there was an Axelian attack that happened primarily with attackers by hackers. These were all primarily part of your financial crimes group. There is a group of financial crime experts So this financial crimes group primarily, which is your Fin11. There is also a group which is your ransomware group, Flop. This is a ransomware group. Now what happened is the attack they demonstrate their SQL injection. They tried to do it across the web applications and web services. So there, what they were doing is they were trying to exploit the entire supply chain, right? So there were never organizations that they had deployed this, the fine transfer appliance, right? The FTA, like your FTP, you have transfer protocol, you have this appliance which is FTA advised appliance. Now these were used by a lot of these big organizations, like for example, Reserve Bank of New Zealand. You had the State of Washington, then you have the Australian Securities and Investment Commission, SIEC, telecommunication giant, some of these telecommunication companies and all. Now, the combination SQL ingestion and command execution attack worked, so primarily, what were the main steps that were being taken care by these people? So you'll see that first the attackers perform the SQL injection to get access to the documents and retrieve some of the encryption keys from the database. Now, once they were able to do this encryption, the second thing that they do is they use these keys to generate some valid tokens and use these tokens to gain access to additional files. Then they also exploited the operating system execution flaw, and they started allowing to execute their own commands as well. Just Yeah, so now when the attackers were primarily able to exploit the operating system, they were able to access certain files and they were trying to write their own commands. And then what happened is attackers also created like a web shell in this part. And using this web shell, what they did is they uploaded the custom full-featured web shell also. They, use some highly customized tooling like a due mode software also. And using this view mode, the attackers were trying to get a list of all the available files from the SQL database. So they were using MySQL, so they were able to use that, get their metadata on the pages as well. And then they performed a file request and they were able to delete some of these download files. Yes, so. So this was one of the scenario, you can we where SQL injection attacks like that. There were a couple of others across the different industries also where SQL injections have basically tried to impact. Now there are different commands and all as part of your SQL injections, which you require to have a good understanding of some of these the data errors that is there. So this is a like a consolidated view of some of these SQL injection cheat sheet. You can consider, you can use it. So here you can see that what are these different types of like union attacks, the bind SQL attacks, which are there. You can use that. And there is a cheat sheet which is there that tells you, what are the concatenations, controls which are there, DNS lookups that are there. So this is good, useful for your database administrators to understand, and as part of your data, some of your, the data guys, the security control, data security teams who understand can go through them and, can understand what are these attacks and, and how it looks like. Right. So that is one other thing that will come in. Then you also have another cheat sheet which is there. So different cheat sheets are available, you can have them looked into them. That can help you to understand what are some of these methods which are there. It's a good use case. We can have a look at them. What are some of these, uh, you know, things that we can. Okay. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is, so we're gonna stop it up to here. Want to give it the remaining time for you to just go through it. So let me just share this with you. So what you can do is just go through these topics that we have covered today. Just read through it also. I'm just sharing this deck and the tools and all, you just go through it. There are two more things that we need to cover, which is cross-site scripting and cross-site request forgery. I think that I can cover in the next session as well, along with that, because the other topics are a little, smaller. I think that we should be able to cover along with that. Should not be a big concern. Monday, I think we'll cover this, and then I'll start with the next topic, which is more on how you need to maintain the access, what are backdoors, trojans, what are the different types of toolkits that we can use, kernel-based, malwares based toolkits that exist. So how do you use them? So we'll have a look at that as well.
Okay. And Saurabh, when you last time you kind of mentioned you'll upload these in the YouTube, right? So just
The
when you
view
get a chance,
videos are
please,
correct, correct.
right?
No,
So
I want to do that quickly also, but actually I'm not getting that time for that. But
no, no,
I'll do that.
I completely agree because yeah, you once you so you stay in Muscat or in
No, actually, I have my work right now in there, so I'm working from there.
yeah,
But
that's what
since I
yeah,
have
you're
my
working from there.
so sometimes I happens that I come back for some work and over here. So I've moved in with my family there because initially I
Ah,
was
okay.
thinking I was planning actually to my family to be here, but it was a bit difficult for me, to manage. And my son is also a bit is small, so that's the reason it
Yeah.
was. Most of the times we are there, but sometimes, for a few
Yeah,
days we
that is
can
it.
come in.
Actually,
That
yeah, I
yeah,
was
yeah,
checking your
that kind of
LinkedIn profile. So I said, yeah, man, okay, Muscat. Like I said, okay,
uh,
okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
No worries.
I
Yeah, when you get a time, do that. And yeah,
yeah,
anyhow, it's time for spend with family as well. So
exactly, exactly. No worries. Thanks for understanding. I'll share this deck with you for today. You can have a
thank
look at
you,
it.
sir.
Well,
Yeah, and
okay.
the
Yeah.
exam one, like the dumps which you have shared.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
those are the ones, right? Like which we will means from those only we will get, right? Like there is no need of modifying or customizing the exam which you have shared with me.
No, actually, what happens is there's a samples again. The exam will not
Correct.
be
Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
These are
But
samples.
these are, just for practice. Obviously, exam questions will be different. that no one will be able to share it with you. But these are like will give you a kind of a sense of the exam feeling. Some of them, you will feel, but this is primarily giving you a kind of a fair idea about
What kind
this.
of
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, yep,
what you can just
understood.
look
Yep.
in.
Got it. Thank you. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Cool. So I'll meet then. We'll have a nice weekend. We'll meet on Sunday then. Sorry, Monday then.
Thank you.
You have a nice
Yeah,
Sunday.
you too.
Okay, sure.
Good night.
Thanks. Thanks, Sunny. Have a nice day. Bye.